Your bare feet touch the cold stone, torchlight flickering and casting long, restless shadows across the chamber walls. Dusty tapestries hang heavy, the air tinged with the scent of damp wool. Your heartbeat pounds like a smith's hammer on an anvil, each thud loud in the stillness broken only by the distant moan of wind through narrow arrow slits. At just 12 years old, your frame still slender as a reed, you stand in a stiff brocade gown that scratches your skin. The threads shimmer like stolen moonlight, yet drag you down like chains. The door creaks open, and in steps a man twice your age, breath sour with wine from the feast below. His eyes carry the weight of kingdoms. This is not the stuff of love songs, this is your wedding night. Fear coils in your gut like a serpent. Tonight your innocence becomes the seal on an alliance written in ink and blood. Your body is a vessel for heirs yet unborn, and failure whispers of annulment, disgrace, or the agony of childbirth that could claim you before dawn. Before we step deeper into these hidden histories of endurance and suffering, if you enjoy uncovering the forgotten truths of the past, consider supporting the channel with a like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'm always amazed that we can explore these ancient, haunting stories together from opposite corners of the world, bound across time by our curiosity. In the dim glow of a single tallow candle sputtering against the draught, seeping through cracked mortar, a girl named Matilda stands frozen. Her small hands clutch the edge of a carved wooden chest marked with imperial eagles. Born around 1102 AD in the English royal court, she had always known her life was not her own. Her father, King Henry I, ruler of lands from Normandy's foggy shores to the hills of Wales, saw in her not a daughter to protect, but a bargaining piece to secure shifting alliances in Europe. By 1109, at the age of 7, envoys from the Holy Roman Empire arrived with a proposal from Emperor Henry V, a man in his 20s, hardened by war and hungry for power, seeking to join his vast realm to the English crown through marriage. The betrothal was sealed in Utrecht on April 10, 1110 AD, and Matilda was sent across the Channel to Germany, a land of deep forests and towering cathedrals, the air sharp with pine and the clang of blacksmiths forging for endless campaigns. Placed under the care of Archbishop Bruno of Trier, she learned the guttural German tongue, courtly dances, and the heavy etiquette of imperial life. Beneath the Latin prayers and embroidery lessons, dread quietly grew. What child could grasp the demands of a marriage bed, her body given to a stranger? In a chamber where privacy was a fiction, and witnesses lurked to verify the union, the wedding came on January 7, 1114 AD in Mainz's Grand Cathedral, its vaults soaring like the ambitions of the men who arranged it. Matilda, now 12, walked the aisle in crimson velvet threaded with gold that chafed her skin, a thin veil shielding her from the stares of nobles from every corner of the empire. Incense smoke curled around the altar where vows in Latin passed her lips, words she understood, but could not fully feel. Henry V, tall, scarred from battle, took her hand with the grip of possession. Bells pealed over the Rhine Valley as they processed to the imperial palace, where feasts of roasted boar and spiced wine masked the tension. That night, in a room draped with tapestries of conquest, servants stripped the bed for the ritual that would prove her purity and his potency. Matilda's pulse quickened, her breath short, the cold air raising goosebumps. The emperor's wine-thick breath closed in. No record remains of tears or pleas, they were erased from the chronicles, but the imbalance was absolute. A girl of 12 to a man of 28, her body unready. For the empire, this consummation sealed an alliance. For her, it ended childhood. Years later, when Henry V died childless on May 23, 1125 AD in Utrecht, leaving Matilda a widow at 23, the emptiness of the union lingered. No children had come, perhaps from her youth or his failing health. She returned to her father's court in Normandy with the hallowed title of Empress, her bareness whispered about as a curse. That night's shadow fear of pain and of failing to give sons would follow her through her later battles for the English throne. Across the Channel, in the sunlit vineyards of Aquitaine, another young bride faced the same fate. Her story is wrapped in the scent of lavender and salt from the Atlantic. Eleanor, born around 1122 AD in the splendid court of Poitiers, inherited one of Europe's richest duchies after her father's death in 1137. At 15, she was radiant, hair like autumn leaves, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Her vast inheritance made her a prize. King Louis VI of France, dying, bound her to his son Louis VII to merge Aquitaine's lands with the French crown. They wed on July 25, 1137 AD in Bordeaux's Cathedral of St. André, where summer heat mingled with beeswax and fresh rushes on the floor. Dressed in sapphire silk stitched with her house's golden lions, Eleanor exchanged vows before lords in clinking armor. Louis, 17, pale from monastic life, seemed more monk than king, his hands trembling as he slid the ring onto her finger. The feast overflowed with roasted peacocks and troubadour songs, yet Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the bed awaiting them. Dusk settled over the Grand as attendants led them to a canopied bed blessed by priests, courtiers raising goblets of spiced wine to their fertility. Beneath her fine linen chemise, Eleanor's heart raced in the humid air. Louis, hesitant and awkward, seemed torn between churchly virtue and royal duty. Some chroniclers suggest he recoiled from passion altogether, leaving Eleanor to navigate the moment with curiosity and pressure in equal measure. Without sons, her position was uncertain. Years brought only two daughters, Marie in 1145 and Alex in 1150, fueling tension. On crusade, rumors of her closeness to her uncle Raymond of Antioch stirred scandal. By 1152, the marriage was annulled on grounds of kinship, a mask for deeper rifts. Weeks later she married Henry II of England, bore 8 children, and built an empire. Yet that first night in Bordeaux stayed with her the fear of a stranger's touch, the burden of heirs, and the unspoken peril of childbirth. Far to the north, along the fog-wrapped coast of Flanders, another tale took shape, a story of quiet defiance amid the bustle of looms weaving the region as famed cloth. Matilda, born around 1031 AD to Count Baldwin V of Flanders and Adela of France, grew up in a court alive with merchants and envoys, the air rich with the tang of sea salt and freshly dyed wool. In her late teens, she caught the eye of William, Duke of Normandy, the illegitimate son of Robert I, who had fought his way to power with ruthless determination. His birth barred him from many noble matches. Later legend embroidered their meeting with drama, claiming Matilda scorned him as a bastard until he dragged her through Bruges streets. By her hair, most historians dismiss this as myth, a Norman flourish, but the real story had its own tensions. Their betrothal around 1049 drew papal censure, as the two were distant cousins. Violating the church's bans on consanguinity meant to prevent dynastic inbreeding. Pope Leo IX forbade the marriage at the Council of Reims, forcing a long delay that tested William's patience. At 20, Matilda felt the strain. Her chambers in Bruges were scented with lavender sachets meant to calm her nerves, as her ladies whispered of the Duke's temper, forged in the fires of Norman rebellions, and the danger of defying Rome. Excommunication loomed as spiritual death in an age when salvation meant everything. At last, in 1051 AD, the wedding took place, likely at Eu in Normandy, in a discreet ceremony under the shadow of the ban. From the chapel's windows, the Channel's waters churned gray. That night, in a hall warmed by roaring oak fires, the consummation took place. The air heavy with the risk that any children might be deemed illegitimate, Matilda's fine Flemish linen gown gave way to the reality of her duty. Her husband's calloused hands proof of his warrior's life. Fear came, not from violence, but from uncertainty. Would Rome's curse doom their dynasty? In time, to placate the church, they founded two abbeys in Caen, securing papal approval in 1059. Matilda would bear 9 or 10 children, among them William Rufus and Henry I, her fertility securing her place as Duchess, then Queen. After the conquest of 1066, she ruled Normandy in William's absence, her seal on charters a mark of power. Yet the unease of that wedding night lingered, resurfacing in family disputes like the quarrel of 1079 with her son Robert Curthos. When she died at Caen on November 2, 1083, William grieved deeply, his own death following 4 years later. Eastward, in Paris's opulent halls where the Seine's waters lapped against stone quays laden with spice from far ports, Isabella was born around 1295 AD to King Philip IV of France and Joan I of Navarre. Raised in the grandeur of the Louvre gardens blooming each spring, corridors echoing with music, she was celebrated for her beauty and quick mind. By 1307, diplomacy sealed her fate. She would marry Edward II of England to settle tensions over Gascony, the last English holding in France after her father's conquests. At 12, she crossed the Channel in January 1308, her ship fighting winter gales before reaching Boulogne-sur-Mer. The wedding, on January 25th, filled the cathedral with frankincense and the gleam of knightly armor. Isabella, in a silver tissue gown and gauze veil, stood beside Edward XXIII, handsome and fond of theater and art. But joy soured quickly. At the banquet, Edward showered gifts not on Isabella, but on Piers Gaveston, his beloved companion, seating him beside the throne while she sat apart, her French relatives furious. That night, in a bedchamber warmed by braziers, the bedding ceremony unfolded. Priests murmured blessings. Curtains were drawn. Isabella's fear was sharpened by Edward's distance, his eyes seeming fixed elsewhere. Chroniclers whispered that his affections lay more with Gaveston, and that the marriage went unconsummated or unfulfilled that night. Without heirs, her standing was at risk. Eventually she bore Edward III in 1312, followed by 3 more children. But resentment took root. In 1325 she traveled to France for peace talks, refusing to return to England. Aligning with Roger Mortimer, she invaded in 1326, deposed Edward II, and ruled as regent until her son seized power in 1330. She spent her later years quietly at Castle Rising, dying on August 22, 1358. Yet the humiliation of that first night remained a wound that steeled her resolve to turn from pawn into power player. In the green fields of Anjou, where the lawyer wound like a silver ribbon through grape-heavy vineyards, Margaret was born on March 23, 1430 AD to Renée of Anjou and Isabella of Lorraine. She grew up amid the Renaissance stirrings of art and politics, prepared for the marriage market of Europe's courts. By 1444, as the Hundred Years' War faltered toward truce, English envoys proposed her to King Henry VI, the gentle, devout man, yet fragile in mind. At 15, Margaret was seen as a hope for peace. Her dowry was a modest 20,000 francs, balanced by the controversial cession of Maine. She arrived in England on April 9, 1445, landing at Portsmouth to cheering crowds and the salt wind of the Solent. They wed on April 23 at Titchfield Abbey in Hampshire, a modest Cistercian house where vows were spoken before an altar dressed in white samite. Margaret wore embroidered satin, her dark hair crowned in pearls, while Henry, 23, stood solemn, his hands unused to war's weight. The feast featured sugar sculptures of lions and eagles, but political undercurrents hummed beneath the celebration. That night, in the abbey's guest rooms, chants from the monks drifted through the walls as the marriage was consummated. Henry's hesitance, perhaps born of his fragile temperament, softened the encounter. For Margaret, the fears were manifold: a foreign land, a husband prone to retreat into piety, and the urgent demand to produce heirs. Years passed before their son Edward was born in 1453, amid whispers of illegitimacy due to Henry's bouts of catatonia. The pressures of politics and war weighed heavily. By 1455 she was regent during Henry's madness, her decisions sparking the Wars of the Roses. Defeat at Tewkesbury in 1471 saw her son slain, Henry murdered, and herself taken prisoner. Ransomed back to France in 1475, she died destitute on August 25, 1482 at Dampierre. That first night's quiet apprehension had hardened into the iron will of a lifelong fighter. Deep in the Welsh marches, where mist clung to valleys like a shroud, Margaret Beaufort was born on May 31, 1443 at Bletsoe Castle in Bedfordshire. Descended from John of Gaunt's legitimized line, she inherited vast estates, making her a sought-after ward. In 1455, King Henry VI granted her in marriage to his half-brother Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond, strengthening Lancastrian claims. At 12, she wed on November 1, likely at her manor in Lammy, Pembrokeshire, a simple ceremony under the threat of Yorkist uprisings. That night, in a chamber lit by flickering rushlights and scented with peat smoke and dried rosemary, Edmund, 24, and battle-hardened, wasted no time. His urgency came from dynastic necessity. For Margaret, the terror was immediate: the pain of an unready body, cold sweat, and the dread of what lay ahead. Pregnant by early 1456, she was widowed when Edmund died of plague that November. Alone at Pembroke Castle, she endured a harrowing labor. On January 28, 1457, her 13-year-old frame left permanently injured, never to bear another child. Her son Henry, future king, was her only child. Remarried twice, first to Henry Stafford in 1458 for protection, then to Thomas Stanley in 1472 for strategy. She navigated the dangerous politics of the Wars of the Roses. When she died on June 29, 1509 at Westminster, she had lived to see her son crowned and had founded colleges that would shape Tudor England. Yet the shadow of that wedding night never left her a reminder of the brutal bargains young brides paid in flesh for the ambitions of men. These stories, woven from the threads of history, reveal the hidden cost behind gilded crowns. Queens bound in duty faced nights when fear was the only companion. Their bodies were the currency of power, their will tested in the furnace of expectation. And yet, from this darkness came endurance, a defiance that still echoes across centuries, reminding us that even in the quiet of a medieval chamber, the human heart can beat against the weight of an empire.